There comes a moment in your journey when the veil is lifted, when you finally see the truth behind certain faces, certain smiles, and certain intentions. And when people with dark motives realize that you know, everything about how they act begins to change. Suddenly their behavior shifts, their tone shifts, their strategy shifts, because exposure is the one thing an evil heart cannot stand. This message is not about fear, it is about awareness. It is about stepping into the light of discernment so you can protect your purpose, your peace, and your destiny. Because when you recognize what is happening around you, you are no longer caught off guard, no longer manipulated, no longer controlled by the shadows of someone else's agenda. Today, we're going to shine a light on the behaviors that appear when evil people know their mask has fallen. We're going to break down the signs, the patterns, and the reactions that reveal what they were trying to hide. And when you understand these things, you walk with clarity, confidence, and authority, never intimidated, never shaken, and never deceived again. When evil people discover that you are aware of their intentions or actions, the very first instinct that often arises in them is to manipulate the narrative. They begin to craft stories, adjust the truth, and twist events to fit a version that makes them appear innocent or righteous. This manipulation is not casual or accidental. It is deliberate and strategic. They are keenly aware that perception is reality for most people. And if they can shape how others see the situation, they can regain control over a scenario that has begun to slip from their grasp. They might begin by questioning your perspective, suggesting that perhaps you misunderstood what happened, or implying that your interpretation of events is flawed. They may even go further, introducing doubt not only about the events themselves, but also about your own judgment and memory. They will weave narratives that shift blame, highlight supposed missteps on your part, and minimize their own actions, making it seem as if you are overreacting or reading too much into a harmless situation. The key here is that they aim to destabilize your confidence in your understanding of reality. By questioning your perception, they hope to create confusion, because confusion is fertile ground for them to regain control. Another tactic they often employ is appealing to emotions, both yours and those of bystanders or mutual acquaintances. They might feign remorse, act hurt or betrayed, or portray themselves as a victim of circumstances or of your accusations. This emotional manipulation can be incredibly effective, especially because it shifts attention away from their actions and toward their projected feelings. When emotions are stirred in this way, even logical observers may begin to question their original judgments. Evil people are skilled at finding allies in unexpected places. When they know, they often reach out to others to support their narrative, spreading their version of the story through subtle persuasion or outright lies. They understand that a solitary accusation or observation often lacks impact, but a chorus of voices can drown out truth. They may frame these allies as simply seeking harmony, fairness, or truth, disguising the fact that they are being recruited to bolster a deceitful campaign. Another layer of narrative manipulation involves preemptive framing. They will attempt to tell their side of the story before you can fully articulate yours, controlling the sequence in which information is presented to others. By doing so, they plant seeds of doubt early, making it harder for the truth to gain traction. In addition, they often exploit ambiguity and gray areas. If there is a situation that can be interpreted in multiple ways, they deliberately emphasize interpretations that favor them while ignoring or dismissing those that expose their wrongdoing. They know that most people avoid conflict and prefer simplicity, so they lean into ambiguity to make their story appear reasonable. These individuals also understand the power of language and tone. They may speak with confidence, use authoritative language, and employ persuasive rhetoric to convince listeners of their version of reality. Even when facts are on your side, their confidence and assertiveness can sway observers. Often they will insert subtle insinuations that you are exaggerating, unstable, or misinformed, This tactic, sometimes called gaslighting, is highly effective because it attacks not just the facts, but the credibility of the person who knows the truth. Evil people recognize patterns in human behavior, and they exploit these patterns to serve their narrative. They understand that people are inclined to avoid confrontation, and they use that instinct to their advantage, making others question whether challenging them is worth the discomfort. They also use timing strategically, releasing information at moments when it will cause maximum doubt or confusion. Social media and communication platforms become tools for them to spread carefully curated narratives. By presenting information selectively, they control the story and the reactions of those involved. Beyond individual interactions, they may manipulate entire groups or institutions to reflect their version of reality. In workplaces, for example, they might involve management or colleagues to frame an issue in a way that casts them in a favorable light. In families or social groups, they may appeal to traditions, loyalty, or shared values to validate their position. Evil people are also aware of human psychology, particularly the tendency to trust appearances over evidence. They will often behave in ways that seem generous, concerned, or trustworthy, creating a facade that contrasts sharply with their underlying intentions. This duality is confusing for observers, because they are presented with two conflicting sets of information, what they see and what they know. They exploit this tension skillfully, making it difficult for anyone to fully reconcile the contradiction. Subtle repetition is another tool in their arsenal. By consistently framing events or behaviors in a particular way, they create a sense of normalcy around their version of the story. When people hear the same narrative repeatedly, even skeptics can start to doubt their own perceptions. They may also employ distraction techniques, shifting focus from the central issue to peripheral matters that seem important, but ultimately serve to divert attention from their own actions. In more sophisticated cases, they anticipate your responses and prepare counter-arguments in advance. They study your habits, beliefs, and tendencies, using this knowledge to preemptively neutralize objections. By the time you respond, they have already planted doubt or confusion, making it harder for your version of reality to gain traction. Another common tactic is the use of half-truths. They mix factual statements with distortions or omissions, creating a narrative that is partly believable yet fundamentally misleading. Half-truths are effective because they exploit the human inclination to accept information that seems familiar or credible. They rely on selective presentation, emphasizing facts that support them while ignoring inconvenient details. Evil people also exploit relationships. If they know that you have allies or supporters, they may attempt to turn these relationships against you subtly. They might sow seeds of mistrust, suggest that your perspective is biased, or question your motives in ways that erode the support network around you. Legal, organizational, or formal systems can also be manipulated to reinforce their narrative. They may interpret rules selectively, leverage authority figures, or exploit procedural loopholes to validate their version of events. This not only protects them, but also casts doubt on the legitimacy of your knowledge. A key psychological tactic involves repetition and reinforcement. By continuously presenting their narrative in different contexts, they normalize their perspective. Observers begin to internalize the story through sheer exposure, often without realizing they are being influenced. This method, coupled with subtle social cues, can significantly erode your position, especially if you are isolated or lack allies. Evil people are experts at exploiting your reactions. They study how you respond to confrontation, questioning, or accusation, and use those responses to their advantage. If you react emotionally, they may paint you as unreasonable or volatile. If you respond calmly, they may see it as a lack of assertiveness or confidence. In either case, they manipulate perception to maintain control. They also excel at creating uncertainty. They will offer contradictory explanations, delay communication, or present information in a confusing manner. Uncertainty breeds insecurity in others, making it more likely that observers will doubt your knowledge or interpretation of events. Furthermore, they often employ subtle intimidation techniques. This can range from body language, veiled threats, or even strategic silence, all aimed at making you question your resolve. The goal is not necessarily overt aggression, but a psychological environment where doubt and fear thrive. They may also exploit the natural human tendency to forgive or rationalize. By presenting themselves as repentant or misunderstood, they encourage others to overlook discrepancies or questionable behavior. This leverages social norms around forgiveness and trust, turning communal tendencies to their advantage. The manipulation of context is another common tactic. They present events or statements in ways that omit crucial context, making actions appear benign or justified. By controlling context, they can shift perception without changing the underlying truth, creating an illusion of innocence. Evil people often exploit the ambiguity of human communication. They use vague language, insinuations, or indirect references to suggest innocence while implying blame elsewhere. This dual messaging makes it challenging to confront them with precision, because accusations become harder to substantiate. Strategic alliances are frequently used. They identify influential figures or groups whose support can lend credibility to their narrative. By aligning with authority or popular opinion, they amplify the persuasive impact of their story, making it harder for truth to emerge unchallenged. Manipulation also extends to the creation of moral dilemmas. They frame situations in ways that suggest opposing you would be morally wrong or socially unacceptable. This technique preys on the innate desire to do what is right in the eyes of others, subtly coercing alignment with their narrative. They are keen observers of social dynamics and exploit power structures to their benefit. They understand the impact of hierarchy, influence, and social proof, and use these elements to craft compelling narratives. Even casual observers may accept their version because of perceived authority or credibility. Timing and pacing are critical tools. Evil people carefully choose when and how to present information, often releasing details in stages to control the flow of perception. By pacing the narrative strategically, they maintain influence over how events are interpreted. Subtle repetition of their preferred narrative also conditions observers. Over time, the repetition reinforces familiarity and perceived truth. Coupled with psychological techniques like selective emphasis, confirmation bias, and social validation, this repetition becomes a powerful instrument of manipulation. They also exploit cognitive biases, understanding how people process information. For instance, they may rely on confirmation bias to reinforce their story among sympathetic audiences, or leverage the halo effect to make their overall persona appear trustworthy despite questionable actions. They skillfully navigate social networks, influencing communication channels, and ensuring that their narrative reaches key individuals before opposing perspectives can. This preemptive strategy positions them as the authoritative source of truth, making it harder for your awareness to challenge them effectively. In digital spaces, they manipulate perception through selective sharing, curated content, and the strategic use of platforms to amplify their narrative. By controlling visibility and framing, they guide collective perception in ways that protect them while undermining your credibility. Another tactic is the careful management of accountability. They may obscure responsibility through delegation, diffuse actions across multiple agents, or highlight procedural complexity, making it appear as if blame cannot reasonably be assigned. This strategy complicates confrontation and shields them from direct exposure. They often exploit the human tendency to seek closure or resolution, presenting simplified explanations or false reconciliations that give the appearance of resolution while leaving underlying issues unaddressed. This tactic leverages impatience and the desire for peace to reduce scrutiny. In all of these strategies, the core objective remains the same: to regain control over a narrative that has been compromised by your awareness. By manipulating perception, exploiting biases, and leveraging social dynamics, they aim to reshape reality in a way that protects their interests, conceals their wrongdoing, and positions them favorably in the eyes of others. Their actions are deliberate, informed, and psychologically sophisticated, reflecting a deep understanding of human behavior and the mechanisms by which truth is questioned, diluted, or ignored. They exploit fear, doubt, trust, loyalty, and perception simultaneously, creating a complex web of influence designed to neutralize the threat posed by your knowledge. They are patient and persistent, often applying these techniques over extended periods, adjusting their approach based on feedback and observed reactions, making them formidable opponents in the arena of perception management. Through careful orchestration of narrative, manipulation of social structures, psychological tactics, and exploitation of human biases, they work tirelessly to maintain dominance over the story, ensuring that, even when truth exists, its impact is diminished, distorted, or redirected. When evil people realize that you have seen through their actions, intentions, or hidden motives, one of their most predictable and dangerous responses is the attempt to intimidate or silence you. They understand that knowledge is power, and the moment you become aware of what they truly are, they also become aware that their influence over you is threatened. Their control weakens, their strategies lose their effectiveness, and the facade they have carefully built begins to crack. In that moment, intimidation becomes their shield, and silence becomes their weapon. They move quickly, often subtly, to regain dominance over the situation by creating an atmosphere where you either hesitate to speak, question your own courage, or withdraw entirely. Evil thrives in silence, and when you stop speaking, they regain room to operate unchecked. So they begin deploying psychological, emotional, and sometimes social intimidation tactics designed to weaken your voice and break your confidence. Intimidation does not always come in loud or obvious forms. Sometimes it is quiet, calculated, and cloaked in reasonable-sounding statements or behaviors. They may begin by suggesting that speaking out will create unnecessary conflict, framing your willingness to expose the truth as harmful, divisive, or immature. They may subtly imply that keeping quiet is the wiser or more mature choice. This tactic preys on your desire for peace, wisdom, or stability, turning your good intentions into chains that hold your voice down. At first, it may seem like they are simply offering advice, but beneath the surface, they are implanting fear, fear of consequences, fear of being misunderstood, fear of backlash, or fear of standing alone. They also use intimidation through unpredictability. When people cannot predict someone's behavior, they become cautious. Evil individuals understand this deeply, so they may alternate between friendliness and coldness, between agreement and hostility, between concern and aggression. This inconsistency keeps you off balance and makes you question whether confronting them is worth the emotional turmoil. They create an environment where you never quite know what reaction to expect, and in that uncertainty, they hope you will choose silence as the safer option. Some will resort to veiled threats. These do not always sound like threats outright. Instead, they sound like warnings or observations. They might say things like, "You don't want to get involved in this," or "people won't understand," or "you'll make things worse for yourself." Such statements sound like advice, but are actually intimidation. They are planting the idea that speaking up will cost you something important, whether it is your peace, your reputation, your relationships, or your safety. They want you to believe that silence protects you when in reality, silence only protects them. evil people may also try to intimidate you socially by isolating you from others. If they can create the perception that you are alone, unsupported, or unlikely to be believed, you are more likely to withdraw. They may speak to others behind your back, twisting events or creating false narratives that make you appear suspicious, emotional, or unstable. Their purpose is not only to damage your reputation, but to make you feel outnumbered. When someone feels outnumbered, they naturally quiet down. If they can make you feel that no one will stand with you, they believe you will eventually choose silence as the path of least resistance. Another method they use is pressure disguised as urgency. They may approach you with statements that suggest you need to drop the issue immediately. They may say things like, "Let's just move on," or "There's no point in discussing this," or "We don't need to talk about it anymore." Such statements are structured to shut the door on conversation before it can begin. The goal is to corner you into silence by making you feel like your concerns are irrelevant or untimely. When done persistently, this tactic creates internal hesitation, making it difficult for you to voice your truth confidently. Intimidation can also take the form of emotional manipulation. They might act wounded or offended, making you feel guilty for knowing what you know. They may portray themselves as victims of your awareness, saying things like, "I can't believe you would think that of me," or "You're hurting me by accusing me." Tactic shifts the emotional burden onto you. By making you feel responsible for their feelings, they hope to weaken your resolve. They use your empathy as a tool against you, turning your compassion into silence. In more advanced forms of intimidation, they may escalate to creating chaos around you. When someone feels overwhelmed, they lose clarity and strength. Evil individuals understand this and may stir conflict, create confusion, or instigate tension to exhaust you emotionally. The more drained you are, the less likely you are to speak with confidence. Chaos becomes their smokescreen, and within it, they hope your awareness will fade and your courage will falter. Sometimes intimidation shows up as surveillance, subtle monitoring of your behavior, conversations, or movements. They may pay close attention to what you say, who you talk to, or what decisions you make. This watchfulness is meant to make you feel controlled or observed. The psychological effect is powerful. When people feel watched, they silence themselves. Evil people use this tactic to create an invisible cage where your silence becomes self-imposed. Another way they attempt to silence you is through exaggerated reactions. They may explode in anger, cry loudly, or dramatically withdraw as soon as you attempt to speak or confront the truth. Such reactions are designed to teach you a lesson. When you address the issue, things get messy. When you stay silent, things remain calm. Over time, this conditioning can shape your behavior. If every effort to express truth results in tension, you may eventually choose silence to avoid emotional turmoil. They are training you to stay quiet by rewarding your silence and punishing your voice. Evil individuals may also try to intimidate you intellectually by challenging your understanding, belittling your intelligence, or questioning your memory. They may insist that you misheard, misunderstood, or misinterpreted the situation. This form of intimidation is subtle but dangerous because it attacks your confidence. When someone repeatedly questions your reasoning or intelligence, you begin to doubt your own conclusions. Once doubt enters, silence soon follows. They know that if they can make you second-guess yourself, they can keep you from exposing them. They may also employ spiritual intimidation, using religious language or moral principles to silence you. They may say things like, "You're supposed to forgive," or "Don't judge," or "Let God handle it." Not out of genuine faith, but as a tactic to shut down your voice. They misuse spirituality as a tool to suppress accountability. By twisting sacred concepts, they create guilt, confusion, and hesitation in your mind, making you feel that speaking the truth contradicts your spiritual values. This tactic is especially effective on people with a sincere heart because they do not want to violate their beliefs. But evil people weaponize those beliefs to keep you silent. Another strategy they use is to overwhelm you with kindness temporarily. They suddenly become overly generous, overly helpful, or overly attentive. This shift creates confusion because their behavior contradicts what you know about their intentions. The goal is to make you question whether exposing them is necessary or justified. By acting kind, they hope to neutralize your awareness. But the kindness is not genuine. It is strategic intimidation dressed in softness, aiming to silence you by making you doubt your clarity. At times, they will try to rewrite history right in front of you. They may insist events happen differently, deny conversations that took place, or claim motives you know are false. This tactic can be disorienting. When someone aggressively denies reality, it creates mental friction that exhausts your ability to argue or correct them. Over time, you may choose silence simply because confronting their lies becomes too draining. They rely on this exhaustion to regain control. In some cases, evil people attempt to intimidate you through alliances. They may form groups, gather supporters, or influence others to stand with them. When they sense that you are standing alone, they use numbers as pressure. They may create the impression that everyone agrees with them and disagrees with you. This social intimidation is powerful because humans naturally fear isolation and conflict with the majority. If they can make you feel socially outnumbered, they believe you will silence yourself to avoid the discomfort of standing alone. They may also use your past against you. If they know your weaknesses, mistakes, or insecurities, they may subtly bring them up to weaken your confidence. This tactic is meant to shrink you emotionally so that you feel too inadequate to confront them. Intimidation works best on those who feel small, so they attempt to make you feel unworthy of speaking the truth. Another form of intimidation is the creation of false consequences. They may imply that your job, relationships, peace, or reputation will be at risk if you speak. These consequences are often exaggerated or completely fabricated, but their power lies in your fear of what could happen. Evil people exploit fear masterfully. They do not need real consequences. They only need you to believe in them. Once fear enters your mind, silence soon follows. And above all, evil people attempt to silence you by making you feel that speaking up will not matter. They may try to convince you that no one will believe you, that nothing will change, or that the truth will not make a difference. This is one of their most dangerous tactics, because when a person feels powerless, they stop fighting. Evil thrives when good people feel powerless.